It always begins on an ordinary day, doesn't it? That's what makes these moments so haunting. March 30th, 2022, in Pensacola, Florida, was a day like any other, with the sun hanging over the Gulf Coast and people moving through their routines. For most, it was another stop for gas, another pack of cigarettes, another quick run inside the Circle K. But for one cashier, a man named Joey Helk, this ordinary day would twist into something unimaginable, something that would burn itself into memory forever, both literally and figuratively. He had no idea that this shift, one of countless he had worked before, would turn into the last normal day of his life. He couldn't have known that the woman who stepped through the door wasn't just a customer, wasn't just another face in the endless blur of people buying fuel and soda and snacks. She was something else entirely, an omen, a spark about to ignite tragedy. Picture Joey behind the counter, the hum of the coolers at his back, the faint smell of gasoline drifting in from outside. His life wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. People who knew him described him as kind, reliable, someone who always had a smile, even during the graveyard shifts when exhaustion weighed heavy. He was the type of person you'd glance at once and maybe forget, but if you came back again and again, you'd realize there was something grounding about him, something that made the world feel just a bit steadier. That morning, he clocked in, maybe stretched, maybe chatted with a coworker. He could not have imagined that by the time he left, his body would be scorched, his life forever scarred. The woman entered quietly, almost unremarkably. That's what survivors always say in stories like this. The beginning feels normal. No one sees the storm coming until it's already overhead. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't waving a weapon. She walked in as though she belonged, blending into the humdrum background of customers. But there was something simmering beneath the surface, something unhinged. And Joey, standing behind his counter, had no way of knowing that he was staring at a person who had already decided what she was going to do. Someone who carried not just a container of gasoline, but an intention as lethal as a loaded gun. It happened fast. Too fast for Joey to make sense of it. One second, he's ringing up purchases, and the next, liquid splashes across him. The acrid, overwhelming sting of gasoline hits his nose, his clothes instantly soaked, his skin burning from the harsh chemical. The shock alone would have been enough to freeze him. But then came the flick of a lighter, the brief, terrible flash of flame, fire. It leapt up his body in an instant, an orange and blue monster devouring him from the outside in. Imagine the horror, your body suddenly a torch, the agony so intense your mind can barely comprehend it. Joey screamed, stumbled, tried desperately to pat at the flames, but gasoline-fed fire is merciless. It clings, it spreads, it eats. People in the store froze at first because when something unthinkable happens, the brain rejects it. This can't be real, it whispers. But then the smell of burning flesh, the sight of fire consuming a living man, ripped them out of their daze. Panic erupted. Someone shouted. Someone grabbed for water. Anything to put it out. Joey himself, in a state of terror and agony, stumbled toward the exit, flames trailing him like a hellish cloak. The woman, this arsonist, she didn't rush to help. She didn't collapse in regret. She turned and ran, leaving behind chaos and screams. Outside, a few brave bystanders rushed to Joey. They tore at their jackets, beat at the flames with anything they could find, doused him with bottled drinks from their cars. The fire eventually gave way, leaving Joey on the ground, trembling, skin blistered and charred, gasping for breath as shock set in. He was alive, but barely. Burn injuries aren't just surface wounds. They are catastrophic, tearing into the body's systems, overwhelming organs, inviting infection, shutting down everything that keeps a person tethered to life. Paramedics arrived, rushing him to the hospital, every second a race against death. Burn victims fight battles that few can imagine, pain that never relents, surgeries that carve and graft, replacing skin with pieces taken from unburned areas, forcing the body to relearn how to exist. The odds were stacked cruelly against Joey, yet somehow in those first hours he clung to life. The hospital became his battlefield, doctors and nurses his soldiers, machines his weapons against the inevitable tide. Meanwhile, the search for the woman began. Police canvassed the area, witnesses describing her appearance, detectives piecing together her identity. This wasn't some random accident. It wasn't a spilled drink or a misfired prank. This was deliberate, calculated cruelty. The community recoiled in horror. How could someone walk into a gas station and do something so monstrous? What kind of rage or madness drives a person to set another human being on fire? For Joey's family, time fractured. Days blurred into nights spent in waiting rooms, clinging to updates from doctors, praying for miracles. Each phone call from the hospital carried a weight that crushed the soul. "He's stable for now," they'd hear. Or, "We're preparing him for surgery." Words that offered a glimmer of hope, but never enough to erase the image of Joey engulfed in flames. His body bore the story of that day, every scar etched with pain, every dressing changed a reminder of what had been stolen. But it wasn't just his body. Trauma isn't confined to flesh. It seeps into the mind, into the soul, reshaping everything. Joey's life was no longer his own. It belonged to the memory of what had been done to him. The town buzzed with speculation. News outlets covered the attack, headlines screaming about the Circle K arson. People shook their heads in disbelief. Pensacola wasn't immune to crime, but this was something else. This was cruelty distilled into flame, an act so senseless it defied explanation. And while Joey lay fighting for his life, police chased leads, determined to find the woman who had turned an ordinary day into horror. But here's the thing about stories like this. They don't end cleanly. Justice doesn't rush in like a knight on horseback, not right away. There are twists, delays, battles fought in courtrooms that feel almost as cruel as the crimes themselves. Joey's suffering didn't end when the fire went out. It carried on day after day, with every breath a struggle, every glance in the mirror a confrontation with pain. And all the while the question hung in the air like smoke. Why? Why did she do it? What could possibly justify such a monstrous act? The answer, of course, is that nothing could. Nothing makes sense of pouring gasoline on a man and striking a flame. Some say she was driven by rage. Others whisper about drugs, about mental illness. But explanations don't undo scars. They don't bring back the life Joey had before. They don't erase the memory of him stumbling through flames or the screams that tore from his throat. Those images linger, etched into the minds of everyone who witnessed it, reminders of how fragile safety truly is. And as the investigation pressed forward, as Joey endured surgeries and treatments, as his family tried desperately to hold on to hope, the community found itself haunted. Because if something so terrible could happen on a random day at a Circle K, then what does that say about the rest of us? About the world we live in? How do we protect ourselves when evil can slip in so quietly, when the ordinary can shatter in the blink of an eye? The days after the fire stretched like an endless hallway, every hour echoing with fear and uncertainty. Joey lay in the burn unit, his body wrapped in bandages that made him look more like a fragile artifact than a man, tubes and machines keeping him alive. Nurses moved around him like quiet guardians, checking monitors, adjusting fluids, whispering to one another in that hushed tone people use when they don't want hope to hear the truth. Each time the door to his room opened, his family braced themselves, unsure whether they'd hear progress or decline. In those rooms, minutes are heavy and seconds drag like weights. Pain is not just physical. It radiates outward, searing everyone who loves the victim. The investigation outside the hospital walls grew more urgent by the hour. Detectives worked with the fragments they had: grainy surveillance footage, panicked witness testimonies, the lingering smell of gasoline on the floor tiles. They began piecing together the woman's identity, tracing her movements before and after the attack. She had entered with intent, not hesitation. That made her dangerous, unpredictable. The police knew she couldn't vanish into thin air. Someone, somewhere, had to know her. They released photos, put out calls to the public. Rumors ran rampant, speculation spreading like wildfire in the local community. People asked, did she know Joey? Was this personal? Or was he just a target of her madness? The mystery only deepened the sense of dread. Meanwhile, Joey's fight was far from over. Burn injuries are not like cuts or broken bones. They don't heal in neat lines. They claw and twist the body into something unrecognizable. Doctors perform graft after graft, carving away dead tissue, replacing it with fragile skin taken from other parts of his body. Each surgery was an ordeal, each recovery a nightmare. When he opened his eyes, the world was haze and pain, voices urging him to stay, to fight, to hold on. His family never left his side. They whispered encouragement, read to him, prayed over him, trying to anchor him in a reality that had been stolen by fire. Joey's mind swam in and out of consciousness, but he was aware, deep down, that life as he had known it was gone. Every movement sent shockwaves through his nerves. Every breath was heavy with pain. The town of Pensacola struggled to comprehend what had happened. This wasn't just another headline, it was something that cut into the community's sense of safety. Circle K was a place people stopped at daily, unthinking. Now it had become a symbol of vulnerability. No. Parents clutched their children tighter. Workers glanced nervously at strangers entering their shops. People whispered about evil walking among them, hiding behind ordinary faces. For many, the attack became a story they couldn't shake, a reminder that horror can arrive anywhere, at any time, without warning. As Joey fought to survive, the police closed in on their suspect. They tracked her through security cameras scattered across the city, piecing together her escape route, identifying her car. The moment her name was released, the town erupted with rage. Social media lit up with condemnation, with demands for justice. Some called her a monster. Others tried to understand what had driven her to such savagery, but the more details that came out, the clearer it became. There was no justification, no excuse, no explanation that could erase what she had done. The act was brutal, senseless, and final. But here's the terrible truth. Even when authorities catch someone, even when charges are filed, it doesn't undo the damage. Joey still lay in his hospital bed, his body an open battlefield. Some nights, machines would beep frantically, alarms summoning doctors to his side. His family would hold their breath, fearing the worst. The fire might have been extinguished, but it had left embers in his bloodstream, silent threats of infection, organ failure, collapse. Every victory was small, surviving a night, stabilizing after surgery, taking a shallow breath without mechanical help. And every setback was crushing. The media followed the case closely, cameras flashing at court hearings, reporters camping outside the courthouse, desperate for updates. The suspect appeared in handcuffs, her face blank, her demeanor cold. Some said she seemed detached, others insisted she looked defiant. But none of that mattered to Joey's supporters. To them, she was the woman who had stolen their son, their brother, their friend. She was the reason Joey screamed in agony each time bandages were changed. She was the reason they lived in a nightmare that had no waking. The trial loomed ahead, a storm on the horizon. Lawyers began preparing, arguments stacking up on both sides. Prosecutors promised justice. The defense hinted at explanations, at mitigating circumstances. But in the quiet of the hospital, none of that mattered. Joey's reality was pain. His future was uncertain. And his family's hearts broke a little more each day as they watched him fight a battle he hadn't chosen. But Joey's story wasn't just about survival. It was about resilience, about the way a community rallies around someone in their darkest hour. Fundraisers popped up, strangers donating to help cover medical expenses. People who had never met Joey lit candles, prayed, sent cards. His story spread beyond Pensacola, sparking conversations about violence, about how quickly life can be stolen. And through it all, Joey hung on, his body refusing to let go, his will stubborn against the odds. Some called it a miracle, others called it strength. But everyone agreed it was proof of the human spirit's refusal to surrender. Still, behind every word of encouragement was a shadow of dread. The human body can only endure so much trauma before it begins to falter. Doctors warned the family gently, their voices heavy with honesty. "We'll do everything we can," they said. But the unspoken truth was always there. Sometimes even everything isn't enough. And so the Helk family lived in limbo, balancing hope and fear, never knowing which way the scales would tip. The suspect's case dragged on, hearings delayed, motions filed, each step of the legal system stretching time like torture. For Joey's family, each court date was a reminder of the nightmarish day, a reopening of wounds that had never closed. They wanted justice, yes, but more than that, they wanted Joey whole again. They wanted to hear his laugh without pain behind it, to see him walk into a room without scars trailing behind him. They wanted the impossible, to rewind time, to erase the fire. And that was the one thing no court could give them. As weeks turned into months, Joey's story became both a local tragedy and a symbol of endurance. People whispered about him in grocery store aisles. That's the man who was set on fire. But those who knew him spoke differently. They said, "That's Joey. He's still here. He's still fighting." His name became a rallying cry, a reminder that even in the darkest flames, light can still flicker, fragile but unyielding. And though the scars ran deep, though the pain was immeasurable, Joey's presence remained a defiance against the cruelty that had tried to erase him. Time has a way of stretching when you're waiting for answers. For Joey's family, the days inside that sterile hospital room became indistinguishable from one another. The walls were always the same pale color, the smell of antiseptic hung in the air like a constant reminder of fragility, and the machines hummed with their mechanical rhythm, offering reassurance and dread all at once. Every beep, every shift in sound was enough to send hearts racing. They lived in a world where hope was measured in breaths and progress was sometimes nothing more than Joey surviving until sunrise. Outside, the legal machinery churned. Prosecutors spoke in confident tones, promising accountability, while defense attorneys worked to humanize the woman who had turned Joey's life into a nightmare. But the tension went beyond courtroom strategies. It was about truth and consequence. The community wanted a clear message that such violence could not be tolerated, that justice would not be delayed or denied. Yet anyone who has ever watched the wheels of justice turn knows they grind slowly and often imperfectly. Joey's condition was a living testimony in the trial. Doctors described the burns covering most of his body, the endless procedures required to keep him alive. Photographs entered into evidence made jurors shift uncomfortably in their seats, unable to look too long at the devastation wrought by fire. His voice, weak but steady when he was able to speak, carried more weight than any lawyer's argument. When he described the moment the gasoline hit his skin, when he recounted the sensation of flames consuming him, silence fell over the courtroom like a shroud. It was impossible not to feel the horror. But even as the case pressed forward, Joey's battle within the hospital remained relentless. Burn victims live on the edge of agony. Bandage changes became rituals of pain, each one a necessary torture to prevent infection. His body fought against itself, organs weakened by trauma, immune system stretched thin. There were nights when his family feared they would lose him, when alarms blared and doctors rushed in with urgency. Yet each time somehow Joey clawed his way back from the brink. His resilience was shocking, a quiet defiance against the flames that had tried to claim him. The community's support only grew. Strangers visited, leaving flowers and cards. Candlelight vigils were held outside the hospital, the glow of hundreds of flames flickering in solidarity with the man who had been nearly consumed by fire. Local businesses donated portions of their profits to his medical fund. Entire classrooms of children sent drawings with messages like "Stay strong, Joey," and "Anna, we believe in you." The love surrounding him became a shield, a reminder that while one person had tried to destroy him, countless others stood ready to lift him up. Yet, beneath all the goodwill, an undercurrent of fear remained. People whispered about how random the attack had been. It could have been anyone behind that counter that night. That realization rattled the town's sense of security. Every late-night worker, every cashier, every attendant in a gas station or convenience store felt more vulnerable. Parents looked at their children's part-time jobs with suspicion. A sense of fragility had crept into the community, and it lingered long after the flames were gone. In the courtroom, prosecutors painted the picture of cruelty. They described how the suspect had walked in carrying gasoline, how she had chosen Joey deliberately, how she had ignited him without hesitation. They called it an act of pure malice. An act of pure malice. The defense countered with arguments about instability, about the suspect's mental health, about moments of lost control. But no explanation could erase the fact that Joey's life was forever altered. The jury watched, listened, weighed every word, but deep down they knew this case was not about sympathy for the accused, it was about accountability. As the trial stretched on, Joey's health wavered. There were days when he was strong enough to whisper encouragement to his family, to remind them he was still here. And there were days when he slipped into silence, his body too weak to fight, his spirit drifting somewhere between pain and peace. His family held his hands through it all, their love an anchor that refused to let him drift away. They spoke to him even when he couldn't answer, believing that somewhere inside he could still hear them. The verdict came like a drumbeat through the town, guilty through the town. The word echoed in the courtroom, sealing the fate of the woman who had caused so much destruction. For Joey's family, it was a bittersweet moment. Justice had been declared, but justice couldn't undo the fire. It couldn't erase the scars. It couldn't give them back the man Joey had been before that night. They hugged one another, cried tears that were half relief and half sorrow. The woman was led away in handcuffs, but Joey remained in his hospital bed, a symbol of both suffering and survival. In the aftermath, reporters swarmed the story, cameras flashing, microphones shoved forward with questions about closure. But anyone who has ever lived through tragedy knows there is no such thing as closure. There is only endurance. Joey's journey was far from over. Every day remained a struggle, every surgery another climb up a steep, endless hill. The fire had ended in minutes, but its consequences stretched into a lifetime. Still, Joey's resilience became more than personal. It became a legacy. People spoke of him not only as a victim, but as a survivor, a man who refused to surrender even when flames tried to devour him. His story spread across states, across countries, becoming a cautionary tale and a beacon of strength all at once. And in the quiet of the hospital, his family continued to sit by his side, whispering words of love, refusing to let him face the darkness alone. But in tragedies like this, even victories are heavy. Because no matter how many people rallied, no matter how many candles were lit or prayers whispered, the truth remained. Joey's life had been stolen the moment gasoline touched his skin. What he had before, the ease of movement, the unscarred face, the freedom to live without pain, was gone. And while the world saw him as a symbol of strength, those who loved him most saw the quiet moments, the tears he tried to hide, the exhaustion in his eyes. They saw the cost of survival. And so, the story pressed forward not toward closure, but towards something else. Remembrance. Remembrance. Joey's story became not just his own, but a collective memory for the town, a reminder etched into the fabric of Pensacola. It lived in the prayers of strangers, in the trembling voices of his parents, in the solemn silence of jurors who had seen too much. It lived in the whispers at gas stations, in the careful glances of cashiers working late at night. It lived in the way people held their loved ones closer, aware now of how quickly the ordinary can turn into horror. Joey's fire burned long after the flames were gone. It burned in the hearts of those who refused to forget, in the community that swore to protect its own, in the spirit of resilience that refused to be silent. And though scars remained, though pain lingered, Joey's existence was proof that even when someone tries to destroy you, survival itself can become the most powerful act of defiance. Time does not heal all wounds. That is a lie we tell ourselves to keep moving forward, to soften the unbearable weight of what has been lost. Time does not heal, it only teaches us how to carry the pain, how to weave it into our days until it becomes indistinguishable from the air we breathe. For Joey and for everyone who loved him, life after the fire was not about healing. It was about endurance, about learning to live inside the ruins of what was once whole. In the years that followed, Joey became more than a man. He became a living reminder of what violence can do, a breathing testament to both the cruelty of one act and the resilience required to survive. His scars were visible, yes, but what people didn't see was the toll beneath them, the sleepless nights, the quiet battles with despair, the constant shadow of pain. And yet, even in that shadow, he found reasons to keep going. His children's laughter, his family's love, the strangers who looked to him as proof that survival is possible. These became his light.